Good evening, and welcome to our returning guests to our special edition of Valley Veterans Forum, in which our group of panelists who we've invited here tonight to participate are all veterans, and we will talk about the upcoming presidential election. This year's presidential election is quite curious and notable, if not for many reasons, not the least of which is the caustic nature of the two candidates which are contesting for the presidential office. The election this year falls on November 8th, the latest date on which it can occur under the current law, which is described as the first Tuesday after the first Monday of the month. For many of us, this is none too soon, as we are growing weary of the constant hectoring and backbiting that's occurred between the two candidates. Will they be able to balance the budget, change the trade deficit, or create more jobs, as they claim? It's up for us to determine if that will happen by casting our vote for the winning candidate. Our panel of veterans is gathered here today to discuss the issues which are important to the veteran and military community, and especially to those who are in active military service. Beyond whatever leadership skills the newly elected president will show, they will be, in fact, the new commander-in-chief of our military, which is the most powerful military in the world. Before we get started, I'd like to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about what they do and what they have done as a veteran. Justin?
Hi, my name is Justin Bond, just shy of 10-year Army veteran. I went in when I was 18, but then I got out, and after 9/11 happened, I joined back up, went back in, and found myself in the Battle of Fallujah, where I was injured. Ended up leaving a leg there and returned home. Like many veterans sitting on the couch, not sure where to go, what to do, I ended up starting a nonprofit called Our Heroes' Dreams. Since then, we've been able to help hundreds of veterans find a new mission, get up off the couch, get off the what I call VA candy, the Oxycontin and the alcohol, and into a new mission by using veterans that have been there, the Vietnam, the Korea, the World War II veterans, the veterans that understand what it's like to have the nightmares. And that has been very successful. We've also have created the new Veterans Community Response Corps. And one way we've been promoting and advertising is we rode a Segway across America at 12 miles an hour from Monterey to Florida. And now, in less than a month, we're going to ride Zoom chairs 2,200 miles at 10 miles an hour for the 22 suicides a day, raising funds and hoping to build the very first full-time veterans camp in America called Camp Freedom. There's actually 3 phases to this camp. Camp Freedom is for veterans of all generations. Camp Liberty is for veterans that lost, or families that lost loved ones, as well as families that lost loved ones to suicide. And Camp Uniform, which will be for first responders and civilian contractors like the Benghazi survivors that were blown up overseas fighting for our country, not wearing the military uniform. So, yeah.
Thank you. Mildred?
My name is Mildred Wright Pearson. I am a veteran of the Army. I was in the Army from 1978 to 2008. I did active duty and reserve. I retired as a reserve officer, started as a enlisted person, so I'm considered a Mustang. And currently I am the 3rd Area Vice Commander in the American Legion, which is one of the biggest veteran organizations that assists veterans. And we're the ones that started the GI Bill. We go to we do legislation for the veterans. We take care of veteran families, and we take care of, do a lot of programs, like the oratorical program and things of that nature, where children of veterans or anyone in the community can obtain monies to go to college. It's a great organization. I love the military. Did not see combat, but if you ask me to go back in, I'd go back in a minute. Thank you.
Thank you, Mildred. Donald?
My name is Donald Webster. I was drafted into the Army in 1965. I went to Officers Candidate School, and after being awarded the rank of second lieutenant, I went to Vietnam. I served in a truck company where we offloaded dock cargo and ran truck convoys all over central Vietnam. I left the Army in 1968, had a long career in the automobile business, retired from that in 2005. I have a wife and 2 grown children. My daughter is a caregiver at a home for disabled children. She's been doing that for around 17 years or so. My son is a police officer in Hawaii. He's a 13 or 14-year veteran of the HPD. And when I'm not under the command of my lovely wife, I've managed to somehow publish 3 books, one of which is a novel whose main character is a Vietnam veteran of all things. So that's pretty much my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Good. Helen?
Okay, my name is Helen Condit. I was born and lived in Fresno all my life. I was a Navy way during the Second World War, back in the 40s. I was only in a year and a half. They did not send women into combat in those days. I never thought I did much, but I'm told that I was one of the first women to do what women did first. So that made my story a little more interesting even to me. But it has been a very long time. I never joined any veterans groups. Just got married after I got out of the service. I have 5 children. They're all grown. I now have 5 grandchildren and 5 great-grandchildren. And I did some dancing for 20 years in the New Wrinkle Show. I did tap dancing, clog dancing, ballroom dancing, and we did some veterans things during that show, and where I wore a uniform and they played our various songs for the military, and I felt very proud and happy to do that. So I'm just living a long life and doing the best I can.
Thank you. Well, as we mentioned earlier, not the least of which is the controversy surrounding the 2 candidates in this election. And I guess the first person I want to throw out for general discussion is the reason. What is the reason for Donald Trump's popularity? Is it because he is not a career politician? Your thoughts?
Well, he claimed that he saw what was going on in the world, and he thought he should step in and see if he could do something about that, in his own words.
Well,
He said he told his children take care of his business, and he was going to run for president.
and he's
I
done
make
that.
that statement.
Is it necessary that he is so caustic, however, in terms of dealing with his opponents? I don't know.
I personally don't think he needs to be that way. I just personally think that's who he is. That's his personality.
I think that the world views America as weak now. America sees our government, our presidency, as not taking a leadership role as we have for years. I don't feel that we need to protect all the other countries and nations, but we do need to protect our own, and I personally don't think it's happening. And when Donald Trump stands up there and says, I'm going to make sure that we're taken care of, I'm going to make sure that ISIS doesn't advance, I'm going to make sure we get our jobs back. And then you look at his record on those things, and yet he's not a politician that's going to be out there lying. He's going to tell you what he thinks. And if you don't like it, he's going to tell you where to go. And I believe that that's what America likes, and that's why he's in the position he is now.
I think you're right in that regard.
Yes, I believe his popularity is due to the fact that he is a person who's been on television, they watched, go through all these shows with, and his behavior is highly inappropriate to be a president. That's my opinion.
I think it's shared by a lot of people, whether they like him or not as a candidate. I'm personally a conservative and a Republican, but it's a big turnoff. And I talked to a fellow veteran just the other day about this, And we both kind of agreed that he does a good job at shooting himself in the foot a lot, in the mouth, or in the foot.
Yeah.
Well, you know, Donald Trump's behavior aside for the moment, Americans on the whole have been largely dissatisfied with the way things have gone in this country for several years now. And at the outset, I think the biggest reason for the rise in Donald Trump's popularity was that he somehow became the conscience, the voice of the people, and he began by saying many things that many Americans felt and themselves, but hadn't had an opportunity to voice on any kind of national platform, and that contributed in a large effect to his initial rise in popularity. The only question now is, can he sustain that now that that initial vaudeville show is over?
I tend to agree with that, but I will also step out there and say that his popularity has to do with our nation's people who believe that some things need to change, but I don't believe he has the capability of following through on any of what he's said he's going to do. Nothing. He doesn't have he's out there because he's telling you what he thinks you want to hear, and which a lot of people do want to hear, but he has no availability or ability to follow through on any of the stuff that he's talking about.
You know, that's an excellent point that Mildred made, and I can add a little bit to that. When, here's an example. When J. Paul Getty was young and firmly, at a young age, was firmly entrenched in the oil business in Texas, he was asked, Mr. Getty, how did you accrue such a fantastic amount of knowledge in the oil business and become so wealthy so quickly? And he said, I didn't know a damn thing about the oil business, but I did know one thing. I knew how to hire the right people and take care of them and compensate them accordingly. And I think if Trump has a strong point, his strong point will be, if he is elected, that he is a proven leader in the sense that he knows how to hire the right people, and from what I've heard, he does compensate them fairly for the most part. So that's what he's going to need to do. He's going to be able to have to assemble a group of people who have capability, knowledge, and experience in the areas where he is lacking. He's going to have to delegate a lot of responsibility and authority to them in order to get the job done.
I think there's just, maybe he's in over his head. Maybe he even realizes it. I do think his children are helping him out. There are times that he'll make a speech in a calm manner and talk as if he has true plans. But basically, to me, he sounds like he thinks he can do it all by himself. Whether he can hire the right people or not, I don't know. Perhaps he could, but who knows? It's an unknown.
Well, he does have a big ego. Nobody's going to question that.
So do all politicians.
To change gears a little bit, I'm going to quote from writer Jim Schaefer from a recent article that he published in a nonprofit magazine. And this came about by the current investigation that the FBI is taking on the Clinton Foundation. They kind of got off more or less scot-free on the private email server thing, but the investigation in regards to their actions to the Clinton Foundation still continues. Jim Schaefer wrote, "Few public figures have sustained careers for as long and with as high a decibel level of accusation and suspicion as Hillary and Bill Clinton. 2/3 of Americans in a recent interview said that Mrs. Clinton is not honest and trustworthy. A decades-old cottage industry exists to attack the Clintons." This is fairly well known ever since the days of Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. There seems to be a get-out-of-jail-free card for any actions they might take that are considered to be unsavory.
Well, Bill Clinton was involved with Monica Lewinsky and not Hillary. So you can't hold her responsible for that. But
No.
Perhaps a lot of people think of it as a reflection on who she is, that maybe that she put up with it is still with him. I heard people say, oh, she'll leave him for sure. Once he's not president, she'll be gone. And I never thought she would. And that's a personal opinion of mine. And they are still together, and they work together. And I believe they must do a lot of good around the country. You're going to be criticized if you're famous. And you're going to be criticized if you're not famous. So I think they handle it quite well. I think they do quite well.
You can hold her accountable for lying to the American people over and over and over, though, about emails, about what she did with her.
But she's been investigated. She's not indicted. She's not, no one has put her in jail yet, even though they say she'd be in jail. I don't know. I think it's politics. Jealousy. I don't know the reason for it. I don't personally know all the lies that she's responsible for. Perhaps somebody else knows. I don't. I don't hear them spelling them out one by one. They just say she lies.
I don't believe either one of them should be president. That's my opinion, though.
Well,
And yet we have only two choices.
at first, I
You
thought
had it
Donald
right in.
Trump was very humorous.
Yeah.
And I told my daughter, I'm getting a big kick out of Donald Trump. But as time goes on and we begin to know the person better and better and better, I feel like I've learned more about Hillary as well as Donald. And he seems to be less qualified to me. And as far as honesty is concerned, I don't believe either of them are completely honest. And so maybe the qualifications, her experiences, are more important than his. To me, they actually are.
To me, her experiences are disqualifying her for being president. I don't know if Donald Trump can do what he says or not, but
Right.
I do know that what she has done, in my eyes, disqualifies her from being commander-in-chief of my military that I love so much, my brother and sisterhood, your brother and sisterhood, because I'm personal friends with the Benghazi survivors. I've spent many days hanging out with them, and I've heard the true stories when they were calling for help, how the F-16s could have been there within 20 minutes, and she personally told them to stand down. She personally told those planes to turn around, and because of that, our men and women are no longer here on this earth. She has blood on her hands. She turned around and lied about it. She lied about what the family said, and they said it all happened because of some video. To
I
me,
would never
she doesn't
dispute what you
qualify.
have to say. You have firsthand knowledge. I just don't know all the facts.
I feel it's really sad that we don't get, reporters can't report the truth. So if the truth was reported, then everybody would know what's going on.
Yeah,
Yes,
in this day and age, unlike when Don and I were growing up as kids, a long time ago, you have your news fed to you a la carte. If you're a staunch conservative, you tune into Fox. If you're a staunch liberal, you tune into CNN and you hear what you want to hear. The question is this news or is this media bias? More and more we're seeing media bias being inflected into the system, and more we're seeing the latest generation of youth becoming discouraged, if you will, over the fact that will we ever hear truth from politicians? I think as we talked earlier, we all agree that politicians lie from time to time, but it's a marked departure from what we were brought up to believe in when we were brought up by our parents.
And on that note, I'd like to interject something here. I found myself at some point in time considering if even a portion of the allegations against Hillary Clinton are true, being the fact that she was Secretary of State, which is a very, very highly responsible position, and of course, the incident at Benghazi, I found myself asking myself, how if those things are even remotely true, why are people still enamored with her, and why are they going to vote for her? And the only answer I could come up with was that they don't care.
They don't care.
They don't care, and why don't they care? And the other answer I came up with in that regard was they don't care because, number one, she represents the status quo, and that status quo in I guess with regard to a lot of people means if she's not elected, they're going to lose something. They're going to lose either political power or money or both. Or in the case of less entitled people in the country, they're going to lose something else. They're going to lose a monthly stipend or something that she is guaranteed that she's promised, and Donald Trump has said he may do a little more digging into that. He may take some of that away. So that's basically what I came up with in that regard. Hillary Clinton is a bought and paid for politician like every other politician in Washington. And Donald Trump, the only thing he has to offer in that regard is that nobody owns him. And we don't know what he's capable of. He may be a complete fool when he gets in office, or he may surprise us and actually be effective. So on the one hand, you have the status quo versus the unknown, which is at best a calculated risk. So that's what we're faced with as voters.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to change gears a little bit and go back to the idea of an all-volunteer military, which we've been with since the draft was abolished in 1973. But it's come up lately because President Obama has made some comments in regards to veterans' benefits that were kind of derogatory in a way, because he inferred that because people are volunteering now to become members of the military, that they've made a decision and they know what the risks are. I totally disagree with that statement, because I think when either you were drafted or you volunteered, you went in with the idea that you were going to have somebody at your back at all times. I think that's the general feeling of a person who serves in the military.
Yes, sir. I was personally there in Atlanta when President Obama made a statement. It was at a Disabled American Veterans Convention, the DAV convention nationally. It was 4 years ago. And he came out and he said that, first he said, they showed a video of what he said, and he actually said he was ashamed of our military. He called our military, our veterans, he called them immature because we weren't volunteering to go under the Affordable Health Care Act, that we wanted to fight him on it, that the American Legion and the DAV and everybody said, no, you're not putting our veterans under the Affordable Health Care Act. You owe it to us because we fought for our country. And after they played this video of him saying that, he came out on stage in front of 10,000 disabled veterans and said, because of what I have passed, you'll always have your medical care. Because of what I have passed, you'll always have this. And in regards, you say, hey, you don't really have any of this. You don't have any benefits. It's basically what it said to us. And 10,000 wounded veterans in their disabled veterans, it was impressive that he would come out and say that. But he did, and I was really ashamed at that point of our leadership in our country to come out and to call our veterans immature and things that he had said about us, because we didn't want to go under that. He said if you're an all-volunteer force, you should volunteer to pay for your own health care if you go to combat, even those missing limbs and things like that.
Well, until you've walked a mile in the shoes and been a soldier, I don't think you really have the capability of appreciating or understanding to the fullest extent what it entails to serve your country and put your life on the line and sacrifice your life as necessary for America. So that's all I got to say about that.
The call to serve. It has no sound, yet I have heard it in the whispered retelling of honorable sacrifices made by those who have served before me. The call to serve has no form, yet I have clearly seen it in the eyes of men and women infinitely more courageous and more driven than most. The call to serve has no weight, yet I have held it in my hands. I will commit to carry it close to my heart until my country is safe and the anguish of those less fortunate has been soothed. The call to serve is at once invisible and always present. And for those who choose to answer the call, for their country, for their fellow man, For themselves, it is the most powerful force on earth.
Trump is in big favor of economic protectionism. He's made statements that we're getting essentially robbed in our trading deals, especially with the Chinese. And yet, our country seems to be in a period of economic prosperity, low unemployment, and part of the platform that he's proposing is going to benefit the wealthiest class, and I would agree that the wealthiest class does pay most of the taxes, but they're also making most of the money, and the reality is in this country that there's a big gap, a much broadening gap between the haves and the have-nots. The middle class is disappearing. Your thoughts on that?
I don't know much about money.
Well, Donald Trump claims to know a lot about it, and he's made quite a bit.
Well, I just have the feeling that possibly probably they don't pay, the very, very wealthy don't pay their fair share. I do believe that there is something to that statement. I'm not, I've lived on a low income all of my life. I struggled to raise 5 children as a single mother and managed to get through it. And I live on my own now with just retirement and Social Security. So I'm not really bad off, but I'm certainly not wealthy. And if I were wealthy, I might have a whole different viewpoint on who should pay more. But I do have the feeling that they could, by paying more, they still have a lot. And they could make a difference in helping people who can't seem to make it an income, do an income, work and take care of themselves as they should. Mm-hmm. And perhaps it's not balanced. The wealthy work toward becoming wealthy, and many times that's their focus in life. In that a lot of them do just care for themselves.
Both parties have people who are holding and clinging on to their wealth.
That's true. Trump made the statement that, and I haven't heard him say it again, but when he was first began to make his speeches, he said he would bring those companies back to America. And I've wondered if there's more to his speeches where he mentions that. And that sounds like might be a good idea, but it also sounds like it cannot be done.
Well, that's the point I was trying to make. There's a lot of resistance amongst, especially these large multinational corporations that were founded in this country to keep their money offshore because they make more money that way, number one. But the bottom line is that the government from both sides, from both parties, has been trying to induce these companies to bring their money back into this country to benefit our economy, and they're resisting it.
I don't personally believe that our economic situation is ever going to improve to any large degree because we have no control over it. The Fed loans money to the government. Every dollar that's printed is a loan to the government. The government has to pay that back in multiple fold. So how is that ever going to translate into an economic policy and procedure that is going to enrich the lives of lower and middle class Americans? I don't see it ever happening. I'm sorry, but that's the way I see it.
I watched the program with Ben Stein on Fox the other day. Most people are familiar with Ben Stein, a very popular television commentator, and he knows his economics quite well. He's not talking out of the top of his mouth. And his biggest concern is that we are on the road to a default of our national debt because there's no way that we can ever pay it back.
I might add something to that as well. A lot of people don't realize that the trade deficit, we're only obligated to ever pay back 1/5 of the trade deficit, and that's budgetary overruns in Washington. The rest of it doesn't ever have to be paid back. Mm-hmm. So I don't really agree with Mr. Stein in that sense. I love Ben Stein, he's a great guy, but I think he needs to explore that a little bit further, that avenue. And a trade deficit is usually, historically, has proven to be beneficial for America. In other words, we export so that we can import, and a deficit is actually advantageous to that. So that's really all I have to say about that.
Well, in that regard, Don, I think I agree with you, and I think that one mistake that Trump is making is it is clearly cheaper to manufacture a lot of the goods that we consume in this country overseas. With overseas labor, that's a lot cheaper than it will ever be. So with the Democrats wanting to raise the minimum wage constantly as a way to try to even things out, I don't see that ever working, because inflation will eventually erode that away.
And ironically, the only thing that is returning jobs to this country is manufacturing. There just needs to be more of it. And the other thing that we need to do, I don't know if it's possible, but it certainly needs to happen, is that small businesses in this country need to have some of the ropes and bindings taken off them so they can actually afford to start a business and have some chance of making it be successful.
There's a lot of things that are produced in China and sent back to the United States. Number one, the money that they're making, these large corporations, the money that they're making overseas is non-taxable, if I'm not mistaken. So they want to keep that money over there. Okay, the products that China, because we have I guess some kind of agreement with them, I guess it's an embargo. When you bring them in, that stuff is not taxed, okay, when you bring their products in here. So they can produce stuff and bring it in a lot cheaper, okay, here. And I agree that here in the United States, we are so bombarded with regulations that people cannot produce and do the things that they can do in China for a lot less.
A lot less, exactly.
Right. So there's always a loophole for the rich. They're going to stay rich regardless. I don't care what kind of regulations or laws you put into place. They're going to find the loophole so that they can keep their money.
In these tense and anxious weeks, I know that every American citizen wants to know what he can do for his country. Not everyone can serve in our armed forces or serve our government, but there is one thing you can do. There is one way you can indicate your devotion to freedom. There is one way in which we can show how strongly we believe in our democracy. Next Tuesday, November 6th, is Election Day. I hope every American will turn out and vote. Every American, every member of his family, and show the world how strongly we believe in freedom, how strongly we believe in our country, how strongly we believe in democracy.
One of the statements that Trump made that I took exception to was about bringing back jobs for the auto companies in this country. Well, the Ford Fusion that I bought 3 years ago was assembled in Mexico, but it's a Ford. It's a wonderful car. And there's no reason why I wouldn't want to drive it and be proud of the fact that it was assembled in Mexico with American parts, because I was able to buy it, probably a lot cheaper than if it wasn't assembled in Mexico. So
I'm wondering why Trump talks about our companies should not be overseas, and he has several companies
well, of course.
of his own over there, which is kind of a
He's a good businessman. That's the way he
Well,
can
this
make
is
money.
the whole idea of offshoring is to avoid paying taxes, among other things, or diminish them. But jumping forward to the upcoming debates, which I'm not really sure about, there's a lot of talk about these debates, but Trump has made a couple of comments that he will not be involved in a couple of them because they conflict with an NFL game. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but up to now, I have to say, I personally have not heard substantial platform statements from either one of the parties. And that's what I'm going to be looking for if these debates come good, because this is their chance for them to one-on-one tell us what they're going to do to make things better.
They make more money by fighting back and forth and slamming each other, not talking about the real issues that Americans face. And it's kind of a comedy thing going on up there. And you want to see who's going to lie the most, who's going to throw the most slams here and there. And they know that's what the news wants, and they're going to get on TV more. And
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't think they have the answers. Washington doesn't have the answers.
No.
So what is to lead us to believe that Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump is going to have the answers? They're not going to have the answers either. So, I mean, take ISIS, for instance. You know, Donald Trump says we're going to bomb the S out of them, and Hillary, I don't know what Hillary has to say about it, but here we've been fighting ISIS for 15 years, and they still haven't realized that, as I have, that we cannot defeat ISIS militarily, for the simple reason that in previous conventional wars, when we defeated an enemy, they came to the table and they signed a paper and said, okay, we're through fighting. Do you think ISIS is going to sit down at the table if there's one Islamic fundamentalist left and sign a paper and say, okay, I'm through fighting? No. He's going to go back and try to find a woman that he can breed to create some more so he can go out and create some more havoc. He's never going to sign that paper. So there is no military solution. The solution is in propaganda and ideology and convincing these people that what they believe in is a false belief. We need to start spending millions of dollars on propaganda, and not from us, from people within their own ranks, people in that country, to somehow get them to be able to convince these people that, hey, you know, that's really screwed up what you're doing, and it's wrong. It's wrong ethically, morally, every way you can think of. And it's not really terrorism, it's genocide. Let's label ISIS what it really is. It's Islamic genocide. You tell somebody they're a terrorist, they consider themselves to be a rebel. You can tell them that they're involved in genocide. What that connotes is the slaughter and extermination of innocent people. So it's not so proud to be someone who's involved in genocide as opposed to being a terrorist. That's the area that we need to concentrate on. I'd love to hear Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton come out and say, okay, we've got a program, we're lining up that we're going to do something like that. We're going to start putting money into propaganda so that we can defeat this ideology rather than just go out and start maiming and killing ISIS people, because that's not the solution. There are times, sure, we have to fight back and defend ourselves, but that's not going to win that war.
I don't understand how we go in and we bomb them when they're not even there in that area. We go in and we bomb their barracks when they're over there doing it. We know where they're at. It's almost like a facade. Hey, America, look at, we're bombing them. We're doing our best job we can against these guys.
There's quite a few similarities between our involvement in Vietnam and why we never made it there. It's because we were fighting an ideology on their own turf, and they were willing to throw lives away, their own lives away, to sustain that ideology.
How can you win a confrontation? Number one, you can't even define it or label it.
Yeah.
You have no end game. You have no solutions to get to the end game. Kind of says it all, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And really, there's other countries down underground backing them and supplying them, and they've got people harboring them so they can grow stronger because they don't like America.
You have to defeat the ideology. That's the only way we're ever going to win, and we're decades away from even doing that.
When Trump says he's going to take our country back, or people who say we're going to take our country back, what are they going to take it back to? The changes we make are sometimes good and sometimes not. But to take it back, that depends on where you're going back to.
Yeah.
But other countries don't think like us. They have their own way of life, and they would not be comfortable here. They would like to live the way they live and think the way they think and have their own religious beliefs. And some countries could care less about who lives or who dies. It doesn't matter. And that's hard for us to understand, because in our country, it does matter. But how you get another country or another person to think the way you think is an overwhelming and sometimes an impossible idea.
It is virtually impossible for any country, including the United States, to take in, even if we increase tenfold what Hillary and Barack want to do, there is no way on God's green earth that we could ever take in enough refugees to even begin to solve their problem.
Right.
It's impossible. So it's very, very humanitarian for us to take in the refugees that we say we're taking in, but even though we don't know how to vet them, and even though ISIS, we know for sure there's going to be some ISIS people in there. What needs to be done with these refugees is that, and they don't really want to come here. They just want to get away from death, murder, and mayhem that's ruining and destroying them and their families. What they really want is to be able to live in that spot that is their home and be able to live a relatively normal life where they have a chance to watch their children grow up and become adults and have them live a normal life. That's the only way that that's ever going to happen. And why we aren't putting more funding and more research into figuring out how we could create areas over there, these safe zones where these people have a chance to rehabilitate themselves and get back into that lifestyle while we're attempting to ward off ISIS and everybody else.
What are your thoughts about Trump's proposed walling off of our borders with Mexico? Is it a realistic solution?
Justin?
Well, you can build a wall, and they're still going to get in other ways. That's not going to stop it.
The Great Wall of China proved that.
Yeah.
Mongol hordes came through eventually.
I've heard him say over and over, "We're going to build it 10 feet taller now. Now it's going to go even taller." Great. I mean, it doesn't build it where airplanes can't go over and land out in the desert, or all these tunnels that are already there. That are I bet you we don't even know 10% of the tunnels that are underneath the border. But it goes back to what the Americans want to hear. It goes back to seeing, hey, you're bringing all these the immigrants over. You're putting them in our country. Some of them are disease infected. Some of them are ISIS. Some of them are this. Some are that. And it goes to him saying, hey, we're going to stop it. We're going to stop Mexico from coming over. Which you're not going to stop that. You're just not. And I think most Americans are smart enough to know that, but they like what it sounds like.
Well, most Americans, for instance, if you're in California, you know that we depend on Mexican labor. Whether it's legal or illegal, we depend on it for our food basket here. And that's been that way for years. And it's not likely to change anytime soon.
I believe putting up a wall is a psychological ploy, okay, to make the American citizens have a false sense of security. That's it.
Which accomplishes absolutely nothing.
Right.
Yeah, and it costs a fortune.
Right.
So, and it's
Oh
Mexico's
yeah, to
gonna
create
pay
some
for it,
jobs.
yeah, well, short-term jobs.
Oh really? I don't know how long it's going to take to build that wall.
Trump says he's still going to build that wall. And a lot of people
Well-
think that's a very good idea.
It's a political ploy for advantage.
A lot of people will vote for him because he says that. So people have different opinions and different ideas about what's right and what will work.
How is it that if
And-
we can figure out that the wall's not going to work, why can't the government
They can
figure it out?
Figure it out. Well, because
I
we
guess
have
we're just too smart.
We have common sense,
Well,
Don, and that's something that's also missing from today's society.
But Trump's followers, voters, people vote for him, believe the wall will be a good idea.
But let's not beat up Trump too bad on this.
No.
Mrs. Clinton doesn't have any answers either. She wants to let them all come in and work for free.
And give them health care.
Give them health care.
driver's
And give them
license.
health
So
care.
let's not beat up Mr. Trump too badly in that area.
Right.
Yeah.
In these tense and anxious weeks, I know that every American citizen wants to know what he can do for his country. Not everyone can serve in our armed forces or serve our government, but there is one thing you can do. There is one way you can indicate your devotion to freedom. There is one way in which we can show how strongly we believe in our democracy. Next Tuesday, November 6th, is Election Day. I hope every American will turn out and vote. Every American, every member of his family. And show the world how strongly we believe in freedom, how strongly we believe in our country, how strongly we believe in democracy.
I'd like to address this question to the ladies. It's been stated that one of the reasons why Hillary should be elected the next president is so that she can penetrate the so-called glass ceiling, which has kept women from CEO positions in this country, although that's changed dramatically in the last decade or two, as we all know. How valid an argument is that in terms of electing the next president of the United States?
Are you saying because she's a woman?
Because she's a woman.
Well, not just because she's a woman. I personally think she's qualified and has had a lot of previous experience in government and knows her way around. And being a woman could be either an advantage to some and a disadvantage to others. I wouldn't vote for her just because she's a woman.
Does
but
anyone really believe that Hillary Clinton cares anything about anything except money? I don't.
I'm of the mind
I don't know.
that I don't care who you are, as long as you're an American citizen, okay, what gender you are, as long as you can do the job and do it the right way. I don't care. Her being a woman does not make me want to go out and vote for her.
No, I wouldn't.
I don't believe she's qualified. She may have some qualifications, but then she's got too many negatives on this side for me.
Yeah, well,
But we're still faced with two people. One or the other's gonna be president.
I'm
So
gonna
you
do a
have to
write-in.
accept some of the disadvantages of one or the other.
I'm going to do a write-in.
A lot of
But that person won't win. So,
I wouldn't have
people-
voted for him, though.
yeah. A lot of, she says I'm a woman, that's why you should vote for me. She has said that, and because she's for women's rights. And what I want to know is, out of all her years in politics, out of her years in the White House, what major accomplishments has she done for the women?
For anything.
Right.
when it
anything.
comes to her being a woman, I am actually curious. I wouldn't vote for her just because she's a woman. But I am curious how a woman's point of view would make a difference in our country. I am curious about that. I'm a woman. I've done a few first things, like becoming a vet, joining the Navy. That was a first thing for women in my day. Another first thing I remember doing is I worked for the Bank of America, and when I got married and I became pregnant, I was one of the first women to work 6 months through my pregnancy. That was a first. There were women got pregnant, they quit, or they were required to quit. And I was allowed to work for 6 months, and that was something most women didn't do back then. That was in 1949. So that was a long time ago. Now it's taken for granted, but back then it was a first. So I would like to see what a woman would be like as president and how she sees things in a different way than men.
I couldn't agree more. I think that is an extremely valid point. I would be very interested in seeing a woman be president of the United States, just not this
Hillary.
particular woman.
And,
But you don't have a choice at this point.
Yes, I do.
Well,
I don't have a choice on the woman, but I have a choice on the president.
But I mean, yeah, you don't have a choice on what woman it might be. That's true.
Not at this point. I'm looking forward to having a choice.
yeah.
one of the things that I wanted to say on this, yes, a woman going in the position of President of the United States, I think would be great, okay? But you have to remember, they said that she's breaking the barrier, okay? How many of our presidents were married? How many of them had a woman behind them that was giving them advice on things that they need to do, especially when it came to women and children? So
Absolutely.
technically, they didn't hold the position, but they had the influence.
And not just women and children, in many of the
Yes.
major decisions.
Yes.
Nancy Reagan, for one.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, Hillary has something that I admire.
What
She
might
can
that be?
smile. And you take Trump, he never smiles, or rarely smiles. When he does smile, it's with his mouth closed, and it's like more like a smirk than a smile. And I think that her charming ways influences a lot of people.
I think you're right, and I agree with you that Trump has a way of just basically having an angry
going-
growl into a camera.
You know, I
And
mean,
maybe he
looks up-
feels that it's necessary to promote his persona as a tough leader, but it doesn't come across too well on the camera, to be honest with
That's true, and I've noticed that with Hillary's opponent. Same way, he never smiled. He always looked, he looked angry. You know, he had wonderful ideas, but he had the look of anger, no smiles. And she comes out and she greets people and she smiles and she's charming.
You know,
Now that may be just a front, or it may be who she really is. But I have a feeling that that is a lot of who she really is. Or she couldn't keep that up.
when I was in the hospital at Walter Reed after getting shot, I was there quite some time, and I had multiple invites to go to the White House. One time when I went there, I was supposed to, my wife, they surprised me, my fiance at the time, bringing her out. They said, somebody wants to meet you. And they pulled up, they wouldn't tell me who, but they said, you got to dress nice. So they brought me new clothes. They pulled up in a 1960s Rolls Royce, and it said Mr. J. Bond on both doors. They really went out of their way to make us feel special and important. We got to the White House, and we were going to have lunch with the president. Unfortunately, something came up. I saw Secret Service literally grab President Bush, take him, and they took him to a helicopter and they took off. We got to spend the whole rest of the day at the White House. I got to meet a lot of interesting people. One of them was the groundskeeper, the head groundskeeper. He had been there since 1946, since Truman was there.
Wow.
And he sat there, he gave me his business card. I still have it today on my desk. And he said I could ask him whatever I want. And I was full of questions. And it wasn't the morphine or the, anything else. I was full of questions. Actually, it was later in the time, and I wasn't on the drugs anymore. And one of the questions was, how is this president, and how does he compare to all the past presidents since you've been here since Truman? And he said, I can tell you. And he went down and he said the worst was the Clintons. He said when he started with Bush Sr. first, I'll tell you that one. He says they knew everybody's name that worked for him, all the employees. Mrs. Bush would go around and, how is your son so-and-so today? She even had birthday gifts delivered to them out of their own personal money. She took care of them. When it came time for holidays, they didn't make all the staff work. They actually went and cooked. The Bushes did. They went and cooked for the staff. President Bush Jr. didn't get to carry on as much as that, but they still sent out the Christmas cards. They still let the staff have off on holidays and did other things for eating and helped the staff out. But they were more busy with the wars and all the other stuff going on. They didn't have the time. So when they got to the Clintons, they said, Mrs. Clinton and President Clinton, they would snap their fingers. Hey, you, we need this done. They never, in the 8 years, they never learned their names. He said, Mrs. Clinton and President Clinton never came up and said thank you. They never said hi, good morning, good evening. He said I was snapped at. And he said there was no personality, there was no interaction. And he told me, and I heard this from 3 different people that knew the Clintons at the time. One time a colonel came up, and he was the one that told me this, and he was there in the area. It was by the Rose Garden. And he said, Mrs. Clinton asked the colonel, why would you waste your life by going into the military? You could have made so much more of yourself. And he said they had no respect for the military. And I've heard that from 3 different people now, not just the one. And I don't get that. I don't grasp it. And when I see her on TV now, it's fake to me. Now, Trump isn't the most personable person, and personally, I probably wouldn't want to go have a drink with them or go do anything else. He's probably a rude person, and he's definitely has a big head and he's full of himself. But I also can see the other side, and it's going to be a very difficult decision for America. And I don't think there is a right or wrong answer, and I don't think there has been for some time. We have not had a choice. We have not had a good choice. Unfortunately, both parties are controlling us as American citizens, and the media is there to make money on it. The media is there to brainwash and put out what we want to hear. They each have their own agendas. We keep going from a Democratic-led Congress and Senate, House and presidency, all the way over to Republican-led, all the way up, and no changes ever make. It's a chess game that's never ending.
Well, Trump is always saying what he's going to do. I'm going to do this on day one. Health care will be gone. We're still the greatest country in the world. I think anybody that has lived anywhere else after being here and coming back, perhaps you would agree, we're still the greatest country in the world. We still have the most fairness toward our people going on, the most freedom to do, come and go and say what we want to say. And you can't do that everywhere in the country.
Well, we know
and I
that.
have not traveled in the world, but I just have heard people come and have seen, even on TV, someone coming back and kissing our ground.
Yeah.
So we are the best country in the world.
I've done that, and I'm
we
pretty sure
do
Justin
solve our
has too.
problems, and we do it in the best way, I think.
I think we all agree that we are seeing a big change in this country. Those of us from our generation and Dustin's generation are losing some of the values that we grew up with and were taught. And for that, I do regret. But I want to thank each and every one of you for taking part in this panel today. I don't know if we solved any problems in regards to the candidates that we're faced with, but I think what we did achieve here is that we were going to open up the eyes of a lot of people to the fact that regular folks like us are just about as concerned as the popular press is with the outcome of this election, and for important reasons.
And becoming informed and educated, and not being totally at the whim and beck and call of the media, and be totally manipulated and believe what you're being spoon-fed. That's extremely important.
Extremely
I can't
important.
stress that more. Open up a book or get on the internet and do some research and actually become informed on these issues without just taking what's said for granted as being the true spoken word.
And both our candidates have got our attention.
Yes, they have.
Yes, they have. Thank again for all of you for joining us for this special edition of Valley Veterans Forum, and we look forward to coming back again and with our next presentation. We feel that we've answered some questions here. We've posed some important questions. And the most important thing that you have to remember on Election Day, November 8th, is to get out there and vote. Voice your opinion. Thank you. Thanks again, everybody.
Hey, I had a great time. This has been a really good.
Yeah.
Everybody did great. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Helen.
Well, I just
Thank
think
you.
everybody has their
very
own
polite
opinion
too,
about things.
to each other, unlike what we're seeing on the
People have their own opinions.
And thank
they
you,
see
Steve.
things different ways.
President Manelsky.
Hey.